Hey guys, hope you're all doing great. I'm Ethan, and today we're diving into another set of wild Reddit stories. If you enjoy these deep dives, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next one. All right, fellas, let's jump right in. First story coming up. Much love, boys.
I didn't know a phone could smell like rosemary and betrayal. I was reaching for a crate of San Marzano cans in our pantry when Lauren's old iPhone slid off a flower bin and smacked the concrete. The screen lit. The lock photo was the one from our soft opening 5 years ago, where she was in a black dress and I was in a chef coat with flour on my cheek. The same pantry, the same light, a different man. I shouldn't have picked it up. I shouldn't have turned it over and seen the camera open last used. I shouldn't have touched the screen and watched the thumbnail jump like it was alive. But I'm a chef, and chefs touch. We taste with hands. We pinch and press and test. The photo that opened was our pantry shelf, but not my hands. A younger pair? A cook's tattoo, new black lines of a knife and a sprig of thyme. I knew that forearm. Miles, our sous-chef, 26. He can break down a halibut like music. In the frame, he's shirtless from the waist up. In the mirror reflection of the stainless prep table, I see the edge of Lauren's hair and her smile tilted. The timestamp at the top said 5:42 a.m., the morning I thought she went in early for inventory. I don't know what a heart actually sounds like when it breaks. Mine sounded like the walk-in door when you think it's shut and it bounces back and hits you in the shoulder. I stood there in the chill of our pantry with the smell of star anise and onions and the old wood of the shelves, and I could feel the place breathing like it always did before service. You spend enough time in a kitchen, and it's a body you know better than your own. We're in Portland, Oregon, on the east side, near Division. We opened Finch and Fire 3 years after our wedding. She ran the front with her phone and her smile and a seating chart that lived in her head. I ran the back with my lists and my temper. I swore I'd retired. Before the pandemic, we were full 4 nights a week. After, we were a ghost that learned to walk again. I burned out slow like an old pilot light, the kind you have to relight with a long match till your fingers smell like gas. Less energy, less patience, less touch. Lauren said we'd outlast the curve. I said we were the curve. She laughed because I used to be witty. I didn't even hear myself anymore. I slid the phone into my apron pocket and finished prepping the shallots like I hadn't fallen through the floor. At 7 a.m., Lauren came in with her hair in a twist, no makeup, the way she looks on inventory mornings when she's pure function. She said good morning the way we've said it 1,000 times, like a spoon tapping a cup. I smelled citrus on her, the peels she rubs on her wrists. I used to kiss there for luck before service. I don't know when I stopped. I didn't say a word. I watched her do the thing with the clipboard where she bows her head and her shoulders set. She walked past the pantry. She didn't look in. We met in a restaurant. That's where we talk. That's where we hide. That's where we come alive. So that morning, I let the place hold our secret a few hours longer. I set the line. I trained prep on the aioli because they kept breaking it. I asked Miles to take oysters off ice to test brine. His forearm flexed and the tattoo moved like it was trying to crawl away. When he walked past me with a pan, I could feel heat come off him like he was a burner set to low. He caught me looking. "Chef?" he said. Miles never called me by my first name, even when we had beers after a brutal Saturday. In kitchens, even intimacy has a title. "Nothing," I said, "just thinking about the special." Later, in the office, I opened Lauren's phone again. I knew her passcode as surely as she knew the way my knee clicks when I get up from the lowboy. I wasn't proud. I wasn't even curious anymore. I was collecting facts like tickets at the prize counter, knowing the prize would be plastic and cheap and would still matter. The photos told a story you could read without translation. A shot of her mouth lit by the pantry strip, a blur of a hand on a hip in the little hall by the dish pit, a live photo that captured 10 frames of a laugh, and the sound of a pan sizzling on the line because the fry cook never turns it off. The clock at the top laid out her alibi clean as chalk. Sundays, early, inventory, or late, after I'd left because I was getting used to 4 a.m. mornings to bake. She knows I won't rage when I'm exhausted. She knows my weak spots. You learn your lover like mise en place. Text threads, too. One with him. He wasn't saved under a name, just a frying pan emoji and a fox face. Cute. I scrolled until it hurt. He sent a photo of his palm dusted with flour. She replied with a heart and a line that made my belt go cold. "You make me feel like I have a pulse." I closed the phone like I'd shut a cooler door on something foul. For a second, all I could hear was the drone of the hood and my own breath in my ears. I held the phone in one hand and my wedding ring in the other and felt the weight difference. The ring is heavier. That doesn't make it stronger. We met in this life. We flirt in tickets and bump screens. We dance between fire and steel. We said we'd never be a couple that looked at each other and saw coworkers. Then the pandemic turned us into payroll and rent and duct tape, and I got quiet and lived in my lists, and she became a schedule more than a person. Secrets grow in the walk-in behind the celery. They feed on steam. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked out to the host stand where she was making a note for the florist. She looked up. Her eyes were bright, the way they get when she has 1,000 things to hold and is holding them all. "Can I show you something?" I said. My voice was steady, like I was about to ask about a delivery. "Can it wait?" she said, writing. "I have to call Leah about the 7 top. They want 2 celiacs and a pescatarian at one end, and—" "It can't wait," I said, and set the phone in front of her like a plate. She didn't touch it. She registered the case, the tiny crack at the corner. She followed the line of it to the home button, like you follow a hair in soup to see where it ends. Then she looked at me. "I don't expect romance from you," I said. "Not anymore, but not in my kitchen." She blinked slow like a boxer keeping sweat out of her eyes. She exhaled through her nose. "And then, God help me," she smiled, not with joy, with fatigue, with a patience you keep for a customer who sent back duck because it was too ducky. "I haven't felt alive in a long time," she said. "You see it. We're dead, Paul. I've been living with a ghost who smells like coffee and onions." "And this is CPR?" I said. "This is me not drowning for a minute," she said. "I'm not proud. I'm not even happy about it. But I'm not going to pretend you aren't in this too." "I'm in this," I said. "I built this. I made you food you loved until you stopped telling me you liked anything. I slept on the office floor so you wouldn't be scared to close alone. How dare you put this on me?" She leaned on the host stand and rubbed her temples. "You stopped being my husband when you stopped looking at me like I was a woman," she said. "You look at me like a co-founder, a barback, a problem. He looks at me like I'm oxygen." "I look at you like the person I built a life with," I said. "You don't get to tell me what my eyes see." Behind us, the front door opened and a produce guy carried in a case of herbs, looking between us like he wished he'd come when the place was closed. Lauren said, "Put that in the walk-in," and her voice snapped like a towel. The guy moved. We stood in the draft from the open door, and I could feel every year of our marriage pass over my face. I wanted to throw a pan. I wanted to fire everyone and turn off the lights and sleep under the bar with the sound of the ice machine as my lullaby. Instead, I nodded once. "Okay," I said. "Here's what happens. We finish today. We don't bleed on the floor, but after service, you and I are going to talk like people whose names we know." She didn't flinch. She said, "After service," and went back to her clipboard like she could write our way out. I cooked like a man trying to outrun a story. The 7 top laughed at all the right places. A couple clinked coupes for their anniversary. A kid in a high chair clapped at the steam from the pasta and said hot like it was the first word he'd learned. My hands did what they always do. The pan got hot when I asked it to. The lamb took the crust like it was grateful. The aioli held. In the past, Lauren called times and smiled at the right jokes and poured water so gracefully, people thought she wasn't pouring at all. That's the trick. Hospitality is a magic act you practice until your wrists ache. Miles moved in my periphery like a lighthouse you can't look at straight. Every time he bent for the lowboy, my gut tightened. My anger wasn't a shout. It was a very sharp knife I held and didn't use. After close, the line was a mess. We did a rough scrub and left it worse than I like. I didn't care. She clicked the door lock and turned the front lights low. We sat in the empty dining room where we'd sanded every table ourselves. Her hair was coming loose, a curl on her neck. I memorized it because I knew I'd miss it, and I hated that I was already grieving while she was still here. "How long?" I said. "A few months," she said. "It felt longer." "Of course it did," I said. "Everything stolen feels longer." "Don't do that," she said. "Don't turn me into a thief. I've been begging you for years." "For what?" I said. "For attention," she said. "For your mouth on my shoulder, not because I nailed a Saturday cover count, but because you like my skin. For a night where dinner isn't tasting spoons. For a weekend where we don't say the word reservation." "I have been tired," I said. "I have been burned to a crisp." "I know," she said. "I've been waiting for you to turn the burner back on. It never did." "And your answer is a kid who calls you bosses and still thinks Beurre Blanc is a sauce for everything," I said. "That's not oxygen. That's a sparkler in a parking lot." She laughed despite herself. That hurt in a new way. It wasn't about him, she said. It was about me. I felt my body again. I felt wanted in a room where everything is either hot or cold, and lately we've been in the walk-in. "This room is sacred," I said. "You did this in our pantry." You say that like we haven't cried in there. Like you haven't held me in there after a Yelp review tore me apart. It's not a church, Paul. It's shelves and spices. It's our shelves, I said. We sat with the hum of the ice machine and the soft tick of the cooling ovens and the faraway swish of a bus on Division taking someone home. Then I said what I think I knew when I saw the timestamp. I can't keep doing this, I said. Not this life, not this place, not with this in the walls. She didn't argue. She closed her eyes a long moment and opened them. I know, she said, and there was relief and sorrow braided tight. What does that mean? It means I'm closing, I said. End of week. We pay everyone out. We call the landlord. We sell the liquor and the copper. We return what we can. We take the hit. She breathed like the ocean. Paul, she said, this is our home. It can't be any more, I said. If I walk in here for one more morning and wonder who was breathing in my pantry when I wasn't, I will salt the earth. I need to be able to taste tomatoes again without hearing you say inventory at 5 a.m. She put her head down. What about me? She said. You'll be okay, I said. You're built for a full room. You could run 10 of these. You could run a hotel. You could run anything. I need to run away. We told the staff the next day. There were tears. There was a lot of staring at the floor. One server hugged me so long I could feel the apology leak out of her. Miles didn't say anything. He wrapped his knife roll tight and put it on a chair. Later, he found me in the alley where I was smoking a cigarette like I do once a year when I need to remind myself I'm not immortal. Chef, he said. Don't, I said. Please don't talk. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean for... It doesn't matter what you meant, I said. This was above your pay grade. You took what was offered. That's on you. The rest is on us. He nodded, eyes on the asphalt. I'll put in my notice, he said. You don't have to, I said. There's nowhere to notice to. It wasn't a joke. It sounded like one anyway. He walked away and I flicked the cigarette into water like a bad movie. The calls to our investor were the ones that made me shake. We didn't take big money. We took 5 small checks from people who love us, who wanted to brag when they brought dates. I told them we'd pay them back over time. One said, it's okay, businesses die. One said, we're family. One said, I always hated your chairs. I cried after all 3. The health inspector came on Wednesday for a routine check, and I stood in the dining room and let the hostess tell him we were closing. He tipped his cap in that way people do when they think you might be contagious. He wrote on his clipboard. He asked if he should mark the file as voluntary. I said yes, because nothing about this feels like a choice, and everything is. We ran our last service on a Friday with a chalkboard that said, thank you, and an extra line of creme brulee because we had too much cream left. We gave away what we couldn't sell. The last table clapped after dessert the way people clap for planes. I cracked sugar with too much force and a shard flew and cut my thumb. I didn't feel it. After guests left, the staff put on a song and danced in the dining room, the way you do when the grief is bigger than you and the only way to stay upright is to bounce. Lauren and I stood in the kitchen and watched. We were the oldest people in the room by a dozen years. Our hands kept finding the same rag, the way they do after 1,000 nights reaching. She said, I'm sorry, because eventually you have to say it. I know, I said. Me too. And I meant both parts, and they didn't cancel each other out. We shut off the lights. The hood slowed and stopped. The place made a final popping sound like a jar ceiling. I wrote a note for the morning bread delivery and taped it to the door with blue tape because that's what I had. Closed. Thank you. Be well. We walked to our cars in air that smelled like wet fur. She turned to me in the lot. Do you want to come home? She said, asking me a favor or an offer. I couldn't tell. I'm going to Ward's, I said. He snores and his couch is too short, but it's honest. She nodded. Okay, she said. Text me when you land. Land where? I said. In the day, she said. Somewhere I can't see you. We hugged like old neighbors. Then we let go. The thing about closing is it doesn't end. You sell a mixer to a pizza place. You let the dishwasher take the stereos because he likes fixing things. You stare at the grease stripe on the tile where the line was and think it looks like a river on a map. You give 2 cases of wine to the bartender because she knows everyone and will pour it for people who laugh loud. You sign a paper and hand your keys to a landlord who will forget your name in a year. You go back one more time to check the back door and end up sitting on the floor of the office on a milk crate, crying because you found the lease from the day you were brave in a folder called Stuff. Lauren moved out a week later. We didn't have kids. We divided the plates and the books, and she took the dining chairs because hers is a life of tables. I kept the Dutch oven I'd told myself I'd leave. She moved into a little apartment by Laurelhurst with a balcony that looks at a maple tree. She sent a picture in October when it turned. I didn't reply. You think you're going to hate the person who hurt you like a sport you train for. But after a while, hate weighs the same as love. It makes everything heavy. I put it down because my hands were full with the business of starting over. I slept, I walked, I cooked for one, I got a job consulting 2 days a week for a neighborhood cafe on Alberta that burned its eggs and wanted to stop. I learned how to bake in quantities that didn't press my lungs. I learned how to stand at a counter in the morning and make 5 people feel like the luckiest people on earth because their coffee was hot and their scone didn't crumble in the wrong place. A year later, I signed a little lease on a corner space that used to be a record store. The floor was scuffed, the windows leaked, the rent didn't make me take shallow breaths. I painted the walls a color I once saw in a bakery in Santa Fe, a green you can taste. I put in 2 tables, 4 high stools by the window, a counter, a simple machine that pulls shots like a metronome. I didn't put up a sign, I didn't print a menu. On the door I painted words that fit in the glass like a poem. On the door I painted words that fit in the glass like a poem. Only honest flavors? People came because people always do. One person loved it and told another. Someone took a picture and the picture made someone else curious. Lauren came once, 6 months in. I watched her through the glass the way you watch rain approach. She had her hair down. She wore a plain white tee and jeans and a cardigan that looked like she might have actually slept. She stood in line and looked at the painted words, and I watched her face do a thing I know. When she stepped up, I said, "What can I get you?" As if she were anyone. It wasn't cruelty. It was the only way I could hand her something without handing her the past, too. "Whatever you're pouring that you're proud of," she said. I pulled a small cappuccino with milk I like from a farm outside Salem. I put it on the counter. She picked it up. She took one sip and closed her eyes. When she opened them, she smiled. It wasn't the smile that made me fall in love. It was smaller. It was honest. "This is good," she said. "Thanks," I said. She put a 5 in the jar, said, "Take care," and left. She didn't look back. I didn't either. My hands were on the counter. My feet were in shoes with no steel toe. I was breathing. The foam on the next drink held for the walk to the window. Sometimes Miles sends me photos of fish on a cutting board from a new place he's at. He's very good. He doesn't say how he is. I don't ask. I heart the pictures because the fish deserves it. When you stand in kitchens long enough, you learn to share grace in small gestures. You salt from 6 inches for a reason. It rains evenly that way. Last week, a guy who used to sit at our bistro bar every Thursday came in. He said, "Man, you were right to close. That place would have killed you." I said, "It almost did." He looked at the words on the door and said, "What if someone wants something that's not on your menu?" I said, "Then they can go somewhere else." He laughed and said, "That's a luxury." I said, "It's the rent." I keep a small thing on the shelf behind me. It's the old pantry label maker, the one that printed tiny white tape we stuck on quart containers for years. My favorite label we ever made says time and another says truth. Sometimes I think the machine knows more than I do. I still think about Lauren when the door chime sounds just so. I think about her when I cut into a tomato that smells like August and say out loud to no one, "Yes." I think about the sentence she said that day that hurt most and still makes a kind of sense if I tilt my head. I stopped looking at her like a woman. I looked at her like a partner. The truth is, I need both. Love that lives in the past dies fast. Love that only lives in the dining room gets cold. The right kind is served where the kitchen meets the floor, where your hand and their hand touch for a second holding a plate, and you both say, "Got it," and mean it. If you want a tidy lesson, I have this. You cannot season a lie into something edible. You can mask it with rosemary and butter and smoke and clever plating, but at the end your mouth knows. The only flavor that lasts is honest. It sits clean on the tongue and makes you want another bite instead of a glass of water to wash it away. I didn't expect to be the guy who closes the place he loved and opens a smaller one. He loves more. I didn't expect to pour espresso for teenagers who sit with sketchbooks and for old men who think the drink is too small and too strong and still come back. I didn't expect to look at my own reflection in the window at closing and say out loud, "Good job," like I used to say to line cooks years ago. But life is a line you cook on, and if you crowd it, nothing sears. You leave room. You hear the fat sing. You take it off a second early instead of a second late, and you let carryover do what it does. On the anniversary of our last service, I went by the old bistro. It's a Pilates studio now. The windows are frosted. Inside, a woman stretched on a reformer and her foot pointed in a line that would make any chef jealous. I stood across the street and smiled like a normal person looking at someone else's life. Then I walked back to my cafe and opened the door and turned the sign and ground beans and watched steam lift straight and vanish. The day was waiting. So was I. 2 questions, if you're still with me. If the person you love told you they felt more alive with someone else, is that a reason to fight for them or a reason to fight for yourself? And if your work becomes your whole marriage, how do you find each other again before your kitchen becomes a pantry where secrets live? If this story resonated, like, comment, and subscribe for more.